They were used to keep everybody's livestock out of everybody's crops, so the livestock, they're free roaming, so they keep things from growing in between those trees. So much that the left turn you all could have taken back there, we'd be able to see all the way back to that left turn during the time of the battle. There's going to be Union artillery placed back in that spot, and they would be able to shoot through these trees. They'd be able to sight and shoot through the trees during the time of the battle. So the Union troops that will line up in this area, they've got artillery right behind them shooting over their heads. Now, that leads me to a point. The type of artillery that will be placed back there, they're 10 and 20 pound Parrott rifles. Highly accurate artillery. So much that the 10 pounders, their maximum effective range is 1,850 yards. The 20 pounders over 1,900 yards. So basically, just so we understand, because we can't see through there and see where they are and see across the field. From where they are, through the trees, over our heads, across that field, that's less than half their maximum effective range. All that being said, it's too easy for that artillery to hit a target across this open field. So, you don't want to be trying to come across, or you don't want to try to come out of the wood line across this field, because the amount of Union artillery that's going to be back there, there are 12 of them back there. There's going to be plenty of Union infantry here. As a matter of fact, the troops that will end up lining up on this line, the Union troops, are led by General W.H.L. Wallace. His headquarters was right behind Tour Stop 1. You saw the big tall Iowa monument. Then there was a tall stack of cannonballs behind it. That's where General Wallace's headquarters was. So just so you know, there were two General Wallaces here. Lew Wallace, to me, he's the other Wallace. And then there's W.H.L. Wallace. The only reason I say this is because William Wallace is here on the first day of the fight. His troops are involved right here during the first day of the fight. His 3 brigades are MacArthur, Sweeney, and Tuttle. You saw those 3 stacks of cannonballs on the way into the park. That's his 3 brigade headquarters under his division command. And he's got several regiments in each of those brigades. So it goes division, brigade, regiments. Now, MacArthur, Sweeney, and Tuttle's brigades, they will start heading the same direction, roughly the same direction you drove from the visitor center, at least from that main entrance road you saw. They all head this direction. MacArthur's brigade will be sent to the far Union left flank on the other side of the peach orchard. If you meet me over there at 3 o'clock, and I promise that talk only lasts 30 minutes, but if you meet me over there, this one lasts 40 years. So. But if you meet me over there at Tour Stop 16 at 3 o'clock, I will point out where MacArthur's brigade was sent. You saw them in the film. Some of those guys, if you saw the films, the guys with the funny looking berets on, the Scottish tans, that's MacArthur's guys. They're over on the other side. But he's still got Sweeney and Tuttle's men here. They'll line up across the road. There's an Illinois monument right there. There's 2 other Illinois regiments, and then Iowa boys all the way up the way. Sweeney and Tuttle's men, he can't even fit all of them in on this line. Some of them will stay back and reserve near those artillery pieces. Some aren't even used until the very end of this part of the fight, because he's got so many. Now, they're not going to be out here in the open. This is another myth I have to bust. It makes a lot of people mad, especially people that have wanted to come see this feature for a long time. Our Sunken Road here was not sunken, especially not sunken like Bloody Lane at Antietam. Makes a lot of people mad, but the truth is a whole lot better than some fabricated or made up whatever stuff. It did have deep wagon ruts in it, but the guys were skinny back then, but not that skinny. Plus, they're gonna get down in the prone. They're gonna fight on their stomachs. They reload on their backs, roll back onto their stomachs to fire. They're not going to do that out in the open right here. They can't use those wagon ruts. They're running the wrong direction for them to be fighting in the prone. Plus, it's nasty and muddy. Plus, it slopes off behind the road. And it says that in all of their accounts, they talk about how they got behind the road where the terrain slopes off, and they got down and laid down and fought in the prone behind the road. So whether this was sunken or not didn't even matter to them, because they had something even better, because the terrain slopes off more behind the road. Plus, they're not going to use this fence. They know they can't use this fence. Besides the obvious gaps in this fence, which I can usually ask a 5-year-old and they'll point it out too. But we've got these gaps in the fence that are obvious. That's not going to help them. Also, the any of the ordnance manuals at the time, I always quote 1862 ordnance manual, it states that it takes 10.5 inches of white pine to stop a smoothbore musket round from 200 yards. So that's only going to add splinters to the round that's about to thwack into their body. They're smart. They're not stupid. Contrary to popular belief, infantrymen are not stupid. We're crazy as all get out, but we're not stupid. We're not going to use this fence because it's only going to add to the round. We're not going to get out in the open because we're smarter than that. We're going to get back there, and that's exactly what those infantrymen did, and it's all in all of their accounts. Now, we'll give you. There are accounts that say it's an old, washed-out wagon road. Exactly. It's washed out where Briar Creek crosses it, and on the other side of the ridge, it's washed out again where Briar Creek crosses it again. That's where this is an old, washed-out wagon road. I'm not taking anything away from the original story. I'm telling you the original story, rather than allowing all these things to just keep going and going and going, so that people will, oh, come, I want to come see the Sunken Road. Well, yeah, then go to Antietam. But if you want to come see a pretty heavy, amazing fight that goes on, this is where you want to be right here. And I'm not saying anything about Antietam. That's a whole other battle. What I'm talking about is, as far as the Sunken Road being sunken, it's not like that. It slopes off more behind it. Now that I've done all that, crushed the dream, sorry, but the truth is better. Now, this Union troops, like I said, they're going to line up back here. Now, the thing about Wallace, and I always like to tell this, it's kind of romantic type stuff, he tells his wife not to come down here from Ottawa, Illinois. He tells her to stay at home. She comes anyway. He thinks she's still at home in Ottawa. She arrives sometime during the battle on the first day. She arrives into the area and actually shows up at Pittsburgh Landing during the fight. Wallace still thinks she's at home in Ottawa, Illinois. All right, we're going to walk this direction, or I'm going to keep wearing down this spot right here. But we're going to walk this way. We'll try to stay close. We're going to head all the way up to the ridge up there. And we've gotten to the point, it's getting close to about 10:30. Wallace's boys are right back here. Good place to see how the terrain slopes off. That's where they're going to place themselves. Now, at 10:30, across this field, still in an open growth, or old growth, open type wood line, straight across the field, it's the same as like I was talking back here. There's going to be a Confederate brigade, Shaver's Confederate Brigade's doing a wheeling maneuver, so that their brigade front can be fronted, or at least so they can have a good shot against another Union brigade that has not yet fallen back to Wallace's line. They're also in the woods across the field. So when Shaver's brigade is doing their wheeling maneuver, their right flank will stick out of the wood line across the field around 10:30 a.m. Right when that happens, Wallace's boys right here ready to get into the fight and do their part. They fire into the right flank of Shaver's brigade. At that point, Shaver's brigade will head back into the wood line quickly because they did not know what just hit them. They were not expecting this, and this changes things. Obviously, Shaver's has been hit, but now the Confederates know where the new line's been established, because that's how this battle's been fought from the very beginning. At 4:55 a.m., you've got Wallace's Prentice's men out on patrol. Then they'll have to call for reinforcements, which will come up. They'll create a new line and fight there. Then they'll end up falling back, creating a new line, fighting, and then falling back again. That's how it's been going from the beginning of the battle. The thing is, what's the difference between Wallace's troops and the other divisions that have already been fighting? Wallace brings his troops forward into battle, creates a stable line for those other divisions to fall back to. So now that at that point, the other Union brigade will end up falling back to Wallace's right flank. Sherman and McClernand's division will fall to his right flank. To his left flank, General Prentice will fall back. Now, like I said, Prentice, fighting since 4:55 a.m., his men have. He's been losing guys from the very beginning of the battle. Starts the battle out with 5,403 troops ready for battle. By the time he pulls back to Wallace's left flank, all he can gather back together with him is about 500 men. Now, there's other men from his division fighting in other parts of the battlefield, but what he's got right with his command is around 500. That adds to what Wallace still has left, around 5,400 or so, not including those men back in reserve. So what he's got on his front line is over 5,000. Prentice has over, well, he's got more than the 500 I was talking about because he gets reinforced, so over 1,000. They've got well over 6,000 just with Prentice and Wallace's divisions here. Got those 12 Parrott rifles straight through the trees. We're closer to them than when we were when we started. Then he's got more artillery up here, Munch's 1st Minnesota Battery. 2 guns on this side of the road, 2 guns on the other. So this first attack that they'll send, now that they know where the new line is at 11 o'clock. This is a dense thicket. This is different than the rest of the battlefield, filled with briars, brambles, thorns, underbrush, any size tree you can think of. It's out here in this dense thicket. At 11 o'clock, Stevens' brigade with 875 men. 875 men armed with flintlocks and conversion muskets. So those conversion muskets and the older version of those, the flintlocks, pushing through here. 875 men against well over 6,000. Plenty of artillery, and what Stevens does not have is artillery. So no Confederate artillery is coming through here. 875 men is not going to do a lot, but they're fighting through this thicket just to get through or to the fight. They get caught up on briars and thorns. They get within 100 paces, they're pinned down, not taking anything away from their attempts, but it's just too easy to push back that first attack that came at 11 o'clock, and they're going to fall back. The next one, not so smart of an attack. Now just so you know anything about General Braxton Bragg, he's the guy sending these attacks forward. This next attack, I do not consider this an attack through the Hornet's Nest because it's not. Plus, the Hornet's Nest didn't get its name till later, but the guys who give the Hornet's Nest its name don't start charging until 12. So, 11:30. On the other side of the field, through the wood line, Hindman and Stewart's brigades. Yeah, Hindman and Stewart's brigades. They come out of the wood line. Immediately under attack of these Parrott rifles, just like we talked about earlier. They're under fire, but basically the infantry that's along this line is about 1 for 1. The one infantryman against one infantryman is trying to charge across this field. They come out of the wood line immediately under attack. Infantry unloads on them. They don't make it to this fence. That newspaper etching that was back on that wayside exhibit back there was done by a guy who was nowhere near this battlefield, was not even in this state. So that's a horrible thing to be looking at. Now, he gets the split rail fence right. That's what I'll give him. But they were all over the south. Anyway. So they get close. They don't get to the fence. Our old 1956 film we used to show until our 150th a few years ago, the longest running film in the Park Service. It showed guys crossing this fence. That didn't happen. So during the 135th anniversary reenactment, guys were crossing the fence at the reenactment because they were going by an old film. But you don't have these guys making this fence because the heavy fire. Plus, you also have Muntz's artillery up here, wheeling their artillery at an angle, shooting enfilade fire at an angle into this attack. Takes out more men than it would in a straight shot. Plus, you got all that artillery back there. I won't even mention it for a minute. Now, they're not going to make it here, and not taking anything away from their attempts. Even though it was 3,100 men, they have to fall back. Then, 12 o'clock. Now, these are our real charges into the Hornet's Nest as far as it goes, because Colonel Randall Lee Gibson's brigade will lead 2,350 men from the south of here, start pushing through these briars and thorns, and they're going to make a series of attacks between 12 and 2 o'clock. We're about to move to one more location, and I'll start talking about their attempts, and I'll talk a little bit about Prentiss Division. Before we do, I got to let you know, people do speed on this road, so I got to warn you about that, so we have to be careful. And plus, when we cross the road, look back to your left, you'll see artillery back there. Unfortunately, it's not Parrott rifles that are in that position, but that's where they were during the time of the battle. So let's head on this direction. We'll get into the good part.